see all of you tonight. So great to be with all of you. I'm actually streaming from Philadelphia tonight. Philadelphia, of all places, city in Pennsylvania. I'm not in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. I am here in my lovely Philadelphia hotel room. But it's a very nice hotel room. And actually, tonight is going to be very, very special because not only will I be streaming from a new location from Philadelphia, but I'm actually not going to have to write the super chats down because my good buddy Michael, my good friend Michael from Philly, is here with me. Hey, say hi, Michael.
Hi.
This is my friend Michael. Michael will be writing down your super chats. So won't that be great? So, you won't have to pause and have me write them all down. Instead, Michael will be writing them down. So look at that. Look at that. And, there you go. So that's going to be awesome. That's going to be awesome. Yeah, I'm just here in Philadelphia for a couple days, but I'll be back in New York shortly. Just had to come down here, and all is good. So that's the way we're gonna do it. I'm gonna do the opening remarks the way we always do, and then from there I'll do the roll call. I'll call you out as I see you, names and locations, and then from there I'll answer your super chat questions, which Michael is writing down for us, and then we're done. So that's the way it's going to work. It's going to be fun. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. You want to hit the notifications bell so you get notified, right? Especially if I do this without a whole lot of notice, like on times like today where I do it without much notice. You'll find out about it. Also, remember YouTube, the algorithms are a little bit weird. Sometimes they unsubscribe people. So you want to make sure that you have remained subscribed. Make sure you're getting the notifications. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention is I'm curious about how the location, right, now that we're not in New York City, how that affects the algorithm. Because I've noticed when I've posted things, especially from other countries, that affects the algorithm. So I'm curious what the numbers will be like tonight. We're not broadcasting from New York City. Today we're broadcasting from downtown Philadelphia, where I'm chilling in this nice hotel room with my good friend Michael. Wow, a super chat came in and Michael is writing it down. Someone says, Harpal Brar is such an inspiration, great interview. But Michael is writing it down. You wrote it down, Michael?
Yeah.
See? He's got it down. He's great. Beautiful, beautiful. So be sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. And I'll start making my opening remarks now. I'll acknowledge the super chats when they come so that you'll know that you were heard, and then Michael will write them down, and then he'll hand me the notebook for the second half of the show, and I'll read them off, and that's how we'll roll. Yeah, not to the second half of the show. You're good. All right. So, folks, I wanted to start out my opening remarks tonight by talking about the fact that there's something going on in the world right now. It's related to the pandemic, but it's not getting very much attention. But it's vitally important. And you would think that this would be big news, but it's not. This was a headline from Bloomberg News. And you'd think this would be all over the front pages. You'd think everyone would be talking about this. This is a headline from Bloomberg News from 6 days ago. I'm going to read to you what Bloomberg News said. Quote, more than a third of the Earth's population, and thank you, Neil, thank you very much. More than a third of the Earth's population faces malnutrition due to COVID. Did you see that? More than a third, more than 1 in 3 people on the planet Earth is facing malnutrition due to COVID. Now, shouldn't that be front page news? Shouldn't that be an emergency, right? If there ever was an emergency, shouldn't that be an emergency? I mean, the fact that more than one in every 3 people on the planet is facing the possibility of malnutrition due to COVID-19. That should be front page news. And in this day and age, where food production is very easily mechanized and carried out, this should be carried out. Lumpia just asked me if what do you think of Harpal's critics of the? It'll come up over there. So there you go. I saw it. You think this would be front page news, right? More than a third of the Earth's population faces malnutrition due to COVID. But what country? This is the weird thing. If you read the Bloomberg News article, they don't name where this malnutrition is happening. They don't name where it's happening. But I had to actually, how do you prove Marxism is the absolute truth? They don't name where this malnutrition is happening. Well, you have to go to the United Nations, the UNICEF, and UNICEF gives you statistics about where this malnutrition is happening. Favorite socialist realist literature, right? Richard Wolff, Google talk of a cure for capitalism, all right? Nigeria, the African country of Nigeria, is one of the most affected countries by malnutrition. Now, this is according to UNICEF. 5 in 10 children in Nigeria under the age of 5 are facing effects from malnourishment. 5 out of 10, that's half of the children under 5 in the African country of Nigeria are facing health effects due to malnourishment. And 4 in 10 people in Nigeria, 4 in 10 people in the country of Nigeria live in extreme poverty. Now, that's an outrage in and of itself. That in and of itself is something to be angry about. But let me tell you something about Nigeria. Nigeria is the top oil exporting country on the African continent. There is not any other African country that exports more oil, more natural wealth, more petroleum, the vital commodity in our global economy. No African country produces more petroleum than Nigeria. Nigeria is a very rich country. Very rich country. What's best in life? It's a very, very rich country. Nigeria is an extremely rich country. But yet, the people there, 4 in 10 of them, live in extreme poverty. 5 in 10 children under the age of 5 there are facing health effects due to malnutrition. Why is this happening? Well, the answer is capitalism. The answer is capitalism. The answer is capitalism. Folks, Nigeria hasn't been the top oil exporting country in Africa for very long. For a long time, until 2011, the top oil exporting country in Africa was Libya. And Libya did not have a crisis of malnutrition, it had the opposite. Libya had the highest life expectancy on the African continent. It had a very low infant mortality rate. It had abolished illiteracy. It had built the world's largest irrigation system, the great man-made river. Libyan students were traveling all over the world to get education. Huge achievements were carried out in Libya when it was the top oil exporting country, when it had a socialist government. Under the government of Muammar Gaddafi, under Islamic socialism in Libya, they were exporting lots of oil, and the people of Libya were benefiting from that oil. Why? Because the oil was not in the hands of ExxonMobil, BP, Chevron, and Shell, like it is in Nigeria today. It was in the hands of the Libyan state-controlled oil company, and they were using those oil profits to build up the domestic economy. But Nigeria, which is now the top exporter of oil, now that Libya has been bombed and destroyed by U.S. imperialism and by NATO, now that Libya has been bombed and destroyed, now that Nigeria is the top exporter of oil, but the Nigerian people are not benefiting from it. There's mass malnutrition, mass poverty, and that has been exacerbated by this pandemic. There's a meme that goes around. These PragerU hacks will share, and they'll claim capitalism is lifting people out of poverty. And that is an illusion. That is a complete illusion. The beginning of the 20th century, Russia was a deeply impoverished agrarian country. But it was socialism that industrialized Russia, made Russia an economic superpower, electrified Russia, wiped out illiteracy in Russia, brought running water to all of Russia, brought a modern medical system to Russia, mechanized agriculture. It was socialism that did all that. And China, at the beginning of the 20th century, China was also a deeply impoverished, very, very poor country. And it was socialism. Socialism that electrified the country of China. It was socialism that, built the steel mills and the power plants and built modern hospitals. It was socialism that has raised 800 to 900 million people from poverty in China. So it's socialism that's lifting people out of poverty. And, there's all this propaganda written about the Arab Spring and how the Arab Spring was caused by a drought, right? It was caused by a drought. Well, there was a drought that was a factor in the Arab Spring, right? The protests that took place in Egypt, the protests that took place in Tunisia were certainly motivated by a drought. And, not having access to water and global warming and its impact on the environment and on farming, that certainly had a factor. That was certainly a factor in the 2011 Arab Spring events. But you'll notice that, yes, while the United States, certainly was observing the fact that a drought played a role in the Arab Spring, the United States used that opportunity to destroy the country that had the world's best irrigation system. The country that was best equipped to deal with that drought, socialist Libya, was the country they destroyed. How do you introduce socialist ideas without using confusing labels? Very good. So that's just outrageous that they blame it on a drought and then they bomb and destroy the country that has the greatest irrigation system. COVID-19. You'll notice that the countries that have been devastated by it economically, like the United States, like Britain, like Italy, like Nigeria, they've been capitalist countries. Whereas China and Vietnam and Cuba and Venezuela and countries like that have dealt with it far more efficiently because they have not allowed profits to be in command. And I want to continue talking and giving my opening remarks here by explaining and just being very, very clear. I may sound like a broken record. I may repeat myself a lot. I may do that. But it's because there is such a lack of clarity about these issues that sometimes things that are not said, that are so rarely said elsewhere, need to be repeated over and over again by those of us who have a grasp and an understanding of them. Right? What is capitalism? Capitalism is a system of production organized for profit. Frederick Engels, he said that under capitalism, the means of production only function as preliminary transformation into capital. Mao Zedong said under capitalism, profits are in command. Capitalism is an economic system where the banks and the factories and the major industries and the oil wells and the big box stores, all these centers of economic power, all the commanding heights of the economy are privately owned and operated to make profits for their private owners. That's capitalism. Capitalism is a system of production organized for profits. And socialism is when capitalism is eliminated. Socialism is when society seizes control of the means of production and operates them rationally, not for the profits of the wealthy few, of a private group of owners who are simply trying to maximize their profits, but rather operates the means of production for the benefit of society. Socialism is a rationally planned system of production. It's when society as a whole takes control of the means of production and organizes them rationally in order that growth is no longer limited. Capitalism faces a problem of overproduction. The capitalist is constantly driving to maximize his profits. In order to do so, he wants to make it as efficient as possible to produce products, hire as few workers as possible, de-skill the jobs so he can pay the workers he does hire as little as he possibly can, produce as much as he possibly can produce for as little as he can possibly pay for it. That is what the capitalist does. He's constantly revolutionizing the means of production, constantly advancing technology in order to maximize his profit, in order to make production more efficient. But in the process of doing that, the role of the worker is reduced, right? And the pay of the worker is reduced. The worker becomes more easily replaceable. Fewer workers are hired. The role of the worker in production is constantly shrinking as the capitalist continues to advance the means of production, to make the means of production more technologically advanced, to maximize his own profits. And in the process of doing that, the worker, who is also the consumer, gets poorer and poorer and poorer. And as more and more goods are being churned out more efficiently than ever, the ability of the worker to purchase those goods is constantly decreasing. The worker cannot buy back the product that he produces. And this is the built-in problem of overproduction. The more efficient capitalist production becomes, the more poverty it creates. Systems of the past, and I've said it before, but it bears repeating. I must repeat myself because it needs to be said. In systems of the past, people were hungry because there wasn't enough food. But it's under capitalism, it's under the system of capitalism, production organized for profit, that people are hungry because there is too much food being produced. In systems of the past, people were homeless. They were homeless because there was a shortage of housing. But it's under capitalism that people become homeless because there is too much housing. In systems of the past, people might be cold in the winter because there is a shortage of firewood or coal or fuel. But now, under capitalism, people are cold in the winter because there is too much heating gas. That is the system of production organized for profit. It is highly irrational. And it leads to a situation where the more technology advances, the more poverty advances along with it. And this problem can only be resolved by socialism, by society taking control of the means of production, by the means of production being rationally organized to serve public good and not simply the profits of a few. And that's socialism, right? There's a song, Solidarity Forever, right? And one of the verses of the song Solidarity Forever, an old Union song, goes like this. It is we who built the prairies, built the cities where, or it is we who plowed the prairies, built the cities where they trade, dug the mines and built the workshops, endless miles of railroad laid. But now we stand outcast and starving, mid the wonders we have made. But the Union makes us strong. Now what is that line? Now we stand outcast and starving, mid the wonders we have made. What is that referring to? Do you think that Lincoln was killed by capitalists? All right, write it down. What does that mean, that line, now we stand outcast and starving mid the wonders we have made? My goodness, will this just hold still? All right, what does that mean? What does that mean? Now we stand outcast and starving mid the wonders we have made. That the worker produces the wealth of the world. The worker builds the factories, builds the mines. The worker goes to the work, does the labor, and works hard. And yet the capitalist is constantly trying to get rid of him because he doesn't want to deal with the labor costs. And as the capitalist makes production more and more efficient, the role of the worker becomes decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. You get a rise in what Karl Marx referred to as the reserve army of labor. The reserve army of labor, unemployment. And pretty soon that reserve army of labor gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And more people are hungry and more people are unemployed. And the capitalist can't sell the goods that he's producing. And there's an economic crisis. And ultimately, the only way this can be ended is with the worker seizing control of the means of production. And this is what Marx was laying out in Capital. This drive of the capitalist to constantly be churning out as many products as he can, expand or die. If the capitalist is not churning out products, selling them for profits, reinvesting those profits once again to get bigger profits, expanding his enterprise. If he's not doing that, his enterprise will go out of business. The rule of capitalism is expand or die, or what Karl Marx referred to as the general law of capitalist accumulation. And the capitalist is constantly trying to eliminate the role of the worker from the means of production with technology. And as a result, The worker can't buy back the product he's producing. That's the problem of overproduction. And by reducing the role of the worker in production, right, as the role of the worker is decreased, as the amount of labor involved in producing a product is decreasing, the capitalist rate of profit also decreases because you cannot extract surplus value. You cannot extract surplus value from a machine. You can only extract surplus value and profits from a worker. And as the role of the worker decreases, the rate of profits that the capitalist makes decreases. There is a tendency for the falling rate of profit. This is all basic Marxism. This is Marxian economic theory, right? And that the tendency of the falling rate of profit, the general law of capitalist accumulation, the problem of overproduction, all of these things necessitate the elimination of a system where profits are in command rather than human reason and intelligence. It all necessitates, whoa, I'm just trying to get this camera to stay still. It all necessitates a rationally organized economy. All right, what do we got here? The Bukharin's ideas of the USSR are different from Stalin's, and the music industry, very good. It all necessitates a rationally organized economy. And with a rationally organized economy, and this is very, very important, with a rationally organized economy, there is no longer a contradiction between growth. There's no longer a contradiction between growth and prosperity. As economic growth continues, technology and prosperity continues, and technology can advance, productivity can advance, and humans can become wealthier all at the same time. And all the artificial restraints on human creativity, all the artificial restraints on human productivity are suddenly lifted. And with rational central planning, the economy can speed ahead. And that is why the Soviet Union was able to rapidly industrialize and become a first world industrial nation, strong enough to withstand a Nazi invasion, strong enough to invent space travel, strong enough to churn out great films like Sergei Eisenstein, and strong enough to have some of the best ballet and music and Shostakovich, and strong enough to electrify the country, strong enough to make the world's first cell phone, strong enough to make the AK-47 rifle. That's why they were able to do it, because they broke out of the artificial restraints on production created by capitalism. And it is breaking out of the irrationality of the capitalist system that has enabled China to have a huge amount of economic growth and raise millions of people out of poverty and keep plowing ahead economically despite the economic crisis that hit the United States in 2008, to keep building hospitals and keep building schools and keep raising people out of poverty, keep eliminating extreme poverty, keep churning ahead and building bigger enterprises, building the world's biggest cell phone manufacturer, building the world's biggest hydroelectrical power plant. China has been able to keep churning ahead because they have overcome the inherent restraints on production created by capitalism. And the goal of socialism and the goal of Marxism is to have all these restraints, these artificial restraints on human creativity and human reason and human intelligence and human productivity and human growth, to have them all lifted so production can soar to even greater heights. So the springs of cooperative wealth can be unleashed so that we can eventually get to a world with so much abundance, a post-scarcity world, that eventually inequality in all forms will fade away. There won't be a difference between mental and manual labor because technology will have advanced so much and so little human labor will be required that there won't be a division between mental and manual labor. We can have a society where technology has advanced so much that labor becomes life's prime want, not a necessity, meaning people work because they feel like working, not because they have to. They're not compelled to work under the threat of hunger, under the threat of losing their home, under the threat of, losing their living standard. Rather, people work to entertain themselves. Labor becomes life's prime want. And under such a society, Dr. Wolf's view of socialism, under such a society, the state could fade away. Coercion could fade away. Right? People could just live on the basis of from each according to his own ability, to each according to their needs. This is Marxism. Marxism seeks to unleash human growth and creativity to far greater levels by lifting the artificial restraints on human growth imposed by capitalism. Great example. Why in the world do we still have a fossil fuel-oriented economy? Fossil fuels are bad for the environment. They're creating climate change. They are inefficient. Fossil fuels are not good. Why in the world do we still have a petroleum-based global economy? We have it because the petroleum markets are dominated by Western capitalism, right? HSBC Bank, that's British Petroleum. Exxon Mobil, that's Chase Bank, JP Morgan Chase. And the big four super major oil companies, Chevron, BP, Exxon Mobil, and Shell Oil, along with Total, they control roughly 80% of the world's oil production. Western capitalism has dominated the oil markets. And so we're remaining on this outmoded, ecologically dangerous mode of production. But yet, fusion energy, which points to the way out of this, would be a much more efficient mode of production. Fusion energy would be far more efficient. We haven't pursued it because it would cut into the profits and the monopoly of Western corporations. Right? And this gets to the essence of capitalism holding back human progress. Why have we not figured out how to acquire natural resources from asteroids or from other planets? Right? We send probes to other planets. Why can't we send probes to other planets to scoop up minerals, scoop up natural resources, and bring them back to our planet? Why not? Right? Why not? Right? Obviously, we don't know how to do it. Obviously, right now, it wouldn't be efficient to do it. But we have to put our scientists to work to figure it out. Why are we not doing that? Again, because of capitalism. Because it would lead to putting the oil monopolists, the oil bankers that sit at the center of the global economy out of business. Right? Capitalism is bad because it holds back human growth. This is essential to understanding Marxism. Capitalism holds back human growth, and this is the nature of imperialism. Imperialism is not the movie Avatar. Imperialism is not Dances with Wolves, Dances with Smurfs. Imperialism is not, cultural hegemony. It's not, McDonald's. Imperialism is the holding back of economic development around the world. It's the export of capital. It's the reason that Nigeria doesn't have its own oil company, that its oil is in the hands of Western capitalist corporations that profit from it. Imperialism is the British Empire going to India and burning down all the textile mills. Imperialism is NAFTA going to Mexico, to people who've been growing their own food for thousands of years. Since the times of the Aztecs and the Maya, people have been growing their own food in Mexico. And American agribusiness with NAFTA putting all the Mexican farmers out of business and creating a situation where people in Mexico have to import their food from the United States, holding back and undeveloping Mexico. Read Walter Rodney's great book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Very important book. How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. This is what imperialism is. Imperialism is about holding back economic development. Imperialism is about holding back economic growth. It's about keeping developing countries as impoverished captive markets where the export of capital, the domination of foreign corporations, prevents them from developing their own industries, their own markets, their own economy, and keeps the people poor. And war is not the essence of imperialism. War is a mechanism for enforcing imperialism, because you'll notice that all the countries that are targeted tend to be countries that have broken out of imperialism. Libya, Gaddafi had broken out of imperialism, built an Islamic socialist society. So imperialist war was used to destroy Libya. Iraq had broken out of the control of the oil banking monopolists with Ba'athist Arab socialism. It had an independent state-run oil company. It was developing its own economy. So the imperialists waged a war and destroyed Iraq. Why do you think the imperialists hate Russia and China? Is it because they just are so concerned about human rights? Give me a break. Russia and China are two countries that have broken out of imperialism, right? China used to be the sick man of Asia, one of the poorest countries in the world. Now China produces half the steel on earth. It has the biggest telecommunications manufacturer in the world. It has the world's biggest hydroelectric power plant, and they can't stand that because every cell phone that somebody buys from Huawei, they didn't buy from a Western corporation. And every ounce of steel somebody buys from a Chinese steel corporation, they didn't buy from a Western steel company. And what about Russia? Why do they hate Russia? Because the way Russia got out of the horror, of the disaster of free market capitalism in the 1990s was by setting up an economy organized around the export of oil and gas. They created two state-run megacorporations, Gazprom and Rosneft. And because they made these two, gigantic state-run megacorporations, they started selling oil and gas on the international markets. They became competitors with Western imperialism. And the big banks and oil companies of the West now see Russia as a competitor, not as a captive market, not as an impoverished captive market, but as a competitor. Imperialism, the essence of imperialism, is holding back economic development. We have this understanding of imperialism that we get from the synthetic left, where imperialism is about, the West going to these beautiful people that live in these beautiful primitive ways and forcing them to be modern. That is not imperialism. That is not imperialism. There may have been an element of that with colonialism, but the economic system of imperialism is the opposite. When the British Empire went to India, did they go to India and say, oh, this caste system that you have in India, this is primitive. We're going to force you to adopt a European model? No. They went there and they reinforced the caste system. They reinforced it because they saw it as a mechanism for keeping India underdeveloped. They saw the people of India who'd been weaving for thousands of years with their looms, and they burned them down, and they forced them to import all their cloth from Britain. Imperialism is about keeping countries underdeveloped. Underdeveloped. That is the nature of imperialism. Imperialism is about holding back economic development. Imperialism is about keeping people poor. Imperialism is about maintaining a system where the world stays poor so that Wall Street and London can stay rich. This is what imperialism is, and this is the problem with capitalism. Capitalism is a system that puts a check, an artificial restraint on human productivity. It holds back human productivity and advancement. It's holding us back. And not only does it hold us back here in the United States, but it goes around the world holding other people back. Imperialism is about reinforcing poverty, driving down living standards, keeping the world poor, making the world poorer. So a small group of billionaire monopolist bankers, the imperialists, the monopolists who sit at the center of the global economy, can continue to enrich themselves, making super profits, from the world. I mean, this is the nature of imperialism. Imperialism, the capitalism of our time is about holding back development. And this is what you must understand. You have to understand it this way, because nowadays there is so much confusion. There's a huge amount of confusion. People think imperialism is a verb. They think it's when a country invades another country. No, it's an economic system. And one of the main things that I want to go after is this notion of degrowth. Degrowth. Because it's one of the main things the imperialists have been pushing for centuries. Right after the French Revolution, before capitalism had even emerged and become imperialism, There was a British economist named Malthus, Robert Thomas Malthus. And Malthus was asked to explain why the French Revolution happened. And Malthus said, oh, the French Revolution happened. Couldn't be that the people of France wanted to break free from feudalism and, didn't like being oppressed by the king. No, the people of France, they just had too many children. The population outstripped the food supply. He coined the term overpopulation. And later, in the 1800s, John D. Rockefeller, the U.S. oil monopolist and banker, became a funder of the Neo-Malthusian Society. The Neo-Malthusian Society, arguing that the reason all these strikes and protests and rebellions were happening across the planet was because there were just too many people in the world. Too many people in the world. We need the poor people, the working class, to stop breeding. And most especially, the Neo-Malthusians argued, the non-white people, they especially need to stop breeding. And there was racial pseudoscience and eugenics. I am 100% in support of the right of a woman to have an abortion. I am 100% in support of it. If they were going to outlaw, they were trying to overturn Roe versus Wade or make abortion illegal in the United States, I would oppose it. I believe in a woman's right to choose, right? We don't have a religious government in the United States. And because of that, it is up to each individual to follow their own conscience. You cannot legislate whether or not a fetus constitutes a human life. You can't do it. So that's why I would 100% oppose any attempt to restrict a woman's access to abortion or birth control. But that said, some of the most anti-abortion people I've ever met, right? And I've met a lot of people in my time that are against abortion. I've met religious fundamentalists, Roman Catholics, but some of the most anti-abortion people I've ever met, you know who they were? They were Puerto Ricans. And in many Puerto Rican communities, you can find people that are very opposed to abortion. And why? Why are they opposed to abortion? Because they remember how the U.S. government had a policy of forcibly sterilizing women against their will, in the hopes of preventing the Puerto Rican population from reproducing. Eugenics and Malthusianism was used to conduct cultural genocide. Similar things were done to African Americans around the United States. Things have been done in developing countries around the world. The maniacally evil monopolist oil bankers, the ruling class, the international bourgeoisie that dominates the United States is made up of very, very maniacally evil folks who are only concerned about their profits and view human beings as financial calculations. And they can't possibly understand that their system is the reason there's so much malnutrition in the world. Their irrational system of production for profit is the reason so many people are hungry. They can't comprehend that. Oh no. Their only solution to deal with the problem of overproduction, their only solution to deal with the fact that we now stand outcast and starving amid the wonders we have made, their only solution to deal with the fact that working people are tired and they're not going to take it anymore, and explosions and rebellions and popular power is mobilizing against them, their only response to it is to say, oh, we need to reduce the population. Is colonialism separate from imperialism? There we go. That's their only response to it. And we saw a rise of Malthusianism during the 1970s. During the 1970s, all over the world, there were rebellions. The Vietnamese people defeated the U.S. imperialists. There were revolutions in Latin America. There were revolutions in Africa. And in response to the global wave of revolution, we had the Club of Rome, a think tank based in Italy, funded by some of the biggest, wealthiest monopolists and bankers. They published a document called The Limits to Growth. The Limits to Growth. And they said, oh, we have to reduce the human population or else there's going to be a catastrophe. And later, the Jimmy Carter White House published a document called the Global 2000 Report, predicting some great ecological crisis by the year 2000 unless they reduced the human population. This is all Malthusianism. When the ruling class sees the mob of hungry people cast aside by their irrational economic system getting bigger, when it sees working people rising up and demanding justice, when it sees their system become inefficient, when it sees a prolonged capitalist crisis created by advances in technology, their response is Malthusianism and degrowth. And you read this Limits to Growth document that was published by the Club of Rome, and it's pure malarkey. It's pure malarkey. According to that document, we should have run out of oil by now. Do you know that? Did we run out of oil? Are we out of oil? No. In fact, we have so much oil right now, they're struggling to keep the price high. Now, why was their document wrong? Why was their document wrong? Their document says we should have run out of oil. We should be out of petroleum by now, according to their Limits to Growth document. Why have we not run out of oil? You know why? We haven't run out of oil because we've invented new ways of extracting oil. We have extracted oil better with deep sea drilling. We've developed hydraulic fracking. And yes, if we had just been extracting oil the way we did back in 1970, yes, we would have run out of oil. But we didn't, because human beings have changed the way we interact with our environment. This is the history. This is the history of human beings, changing the way we interact with our environment. Human beings are constantly changing the way we interact with our environment. If you ever met a caveman, if you could go back